Welcome back to The Morning Blend. This award-winning book, We Gotta Get Out of This Place, the soundtrack of the Vietnam War, explores how and why U.S. troops turned to different songs to cope with the war that they'd been sent to fight. It didn't matter what someone's background was, black, white, man, woman, officers, grunts. The music was important for every group of Vietnam veterans. Yeah, and we're here now with the co-authors, Doug Bradley and Craig Werner. Nice to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's talk a little bit about the music. Why you guys think it was so influential in the area in the Vietnam War?
It was because radio was our internet in those days, and so we all listened to the same music. So it was a great way for us to sort of form connections and community. And boy, if you ever needed it, you needed that overseas. So what we found was that it was a way for guys to, and women too, to sort of connect with people back home or the people that they were in the war with. It was a way for them to sort of get through that experience, and for some it was a way to get back home. Plus the music is so fantastic. I mean, it's the greatest music of all time.
Yeah, and I want to talk about some of the songs in particular, but first, just a little bit about you guys. You're a Vietnam veteran, Doug. Craig, you're a professor at UW-Madison. Together, you teach a course at Madison to some lucky students who are lucky enough to get your class, I would bet, specifically on music in the Vietnam War. And kind of, because isn't it true that Vietnam was sort of the first war where music was such a big part, you know, and an identifiable, important part of the experience?
Yeah, it was part of the generational identity at that time. It was a moment when rock and soul and country were talking to each other, and that was a major part of it. Is everybody, didn't matter if you were a country fan, you knew who James Brown was. If you were a rock fan, you knew who Johnny Cash was. And when we go into the class, we put journalism, we put music, we put the movies at the center to try to put the emphasis on the human meanings of Vietnam, what it was like to be there for the vets, for the people around, as opposed to the political issues, which are part of it, of course, but not at the center.
Yeah. Well, and I think Molly, I was just going to follow up Molly's, and that is that, you know, everybody talks about music from World War I and World War II. We know those, but we had that music all the time, and as you said, we had cassettes, we had reel-to-reel tape decks, we had Armed Forces radio 24/7. So we had bands, we had live music. So we were able to get music in ways that you know, generations in earlier wars weren't able to have access to. We had it all the time.
Yeah. Well, and is that, you kind of touched on a little bit maybe where this is going, but is that sort of the difference of how music resonated with vets versus those folks back at home? Is that there was the political underlying of some music back home, but it maybe didn't feel that way, or it was more unifying for people who were serving? Is that the difference?
Yeah, I played with a rock and roll band in Colorado Springs that played a lot on basses. We played a lot for the vets, and we also played for college students and at clubs. And there was a notable difference in the way that the vets and the soldiers responded to the music. Different songs meant different kinds of things. Got a very, very intense response to songs like Nancy Sinatra's "These Boots Are Made for Walking." Boots meant something. If you were walking miles and miles through the jungles and the Delta, that they didn't mean on the civilian side.
It's interesting. Is it true that most units had a musician within their unit who could play the top songs?
Oftentimes. I mean, yeah, I think one of the things we forget about Vietnam is we only see the stories about the combat and the fighting and the dying, and that is the horrible part of war. But, you know, there were a lot more people in the rear than there were in the field. That didn't mean everybody wasn't in some sort of danger worse out there. But so we had downtime. Not as much when you're out there, but the rest of us who were supporting the guys in the field. And, you know, music was a great way to fill that downtime. And if you couldn't get AFVN, or you couldn't get to hear, you know, Johnny Cash when he came in country, somebody in that hooch would probably pick up a guitar, might have a guitar. We have wonderful stories about people that cover the book. That great shot, a guy's got you know, an M16 and a guitar. But that would happen, and it's funny because the music they would play would be Bob Dylan, would be sometimes protest music, but for us when we were there, it was just comfort.
Well, and talk specifically to the name of the book. The song "We Gotta Get Out of This Place" by the Animals is really what you feel is the national anthem of the Vietnam vets.
It is. I mean, and we heard some of the guys and women that were earlier, say pre-Gulf of Tonkin or in '65 when this song came out. It might not be, But boy, you talk to anybody later, and of course it's literal. I mean, it's the lyrics. You know, we had pretty defined tours, 12 or 13 months. So getting out of that place was, once you were there, you wanted to get out of that place. It was sort of essential. But the funny thing is that the song, it was intended both by the writers and the performers as not to mean that.
Yeah, it was a Get Out of the Ghetto song, written as a follow-up for You Lost That Lovin' Feeling for the Righteous Brothers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Was the U.S. military, was our government supportive of getting soldiers the music they wanted to listen to?
Very much, particularly later in the war, after it reached the point where there was a lot of racial tension in Vietnam, where there was much political tension at home, and amongst the vets, too. That the anti-war movement was powered largely by Vietnam veterans, which is part of the story we forget. But the government wanted the soldiers there to have the creature comforts to make them feel less likely to be dissatisfied.
Fascinating. You guys tonight have this incredible event at the War Memorial. It's at 5 o'clock today. And what's going to happen is that you'll talk about the book and this fascinating connection between music and that era and that war, that conflict in particular. But people can then stick around for live music, food, drinks, and it's completely free, open to the public. Bring a veteran.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
Great
super
event.
fun. Are you going to be playing music?
We're not playing, but we're listening.
I love it. Thanks, you guys, so much for coming
Thanks,
to talk to us and sharing your work with us. We appreciate it. Great event tonight, too.
Thanks.
Thank you.